see so many people joining us this evening, and it's really important actually that the Labour Party is reaching out and encouraging new members to get involved, because we've got a big job to do. We've actually doing very well in the opinion polls. I'm fully expectant and hopeful that we will do well in the Corby by-election, but we're not taking anything for granted there, and that'd be a great feather in our cap if we win that seat this week. And obviously we need to do well in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections as well. But I was looking at some polling recently which showed that whilst we are winning back a lot of support, a lot of the people that have voted for the Liberal Democrats at the last election, I think 1 in 4 are coming back to the Labour Party, 1 in 10 Tories are coming back to the Labour Party. There's still a lot of people to be won over to the Labour cause. The support for the Tories is frustratingly sticking at a significantly high level. It's well below us at the moment, but we can't take anything for granted. So it's absolutely vital that we do well in these by-elections, that we do well in the PCC elections. I know you haven't got PCC elections in Enfield, but it's really important that we're out every week campaigning, talking to people and actually standing up for Labour values. And I think we've got a fantastic history in the Labour movement, haven't we? It's the Labour Party that is the best vehicle, the only vehicle really that delivered progressive social change in our country. And you look at all of the post-war social advances that have been made, and sometimes we forget this. They've only been made by Labour governments. The National Health Service, the welfare state, comprehensive education, equal rights, Race Discrimination Act, the minimum wage, Sure Start children's centres, all of these things were only delivered by Labour governments, in the teeth very often of opposition, not just from the Tories, but from the Liberal Democrats as well. The Liberal Democrats were not in favour, let's remind ourselves, of the minimum wage. And I think it's important we get that message out there to people. That yes, we've made mistakes in government, we didn't get everything right, but my God, we did actually make a real difference, I think, to people's lives. We did actually improve people's lives for the better in those 13 years that we were in government, and indeed in the years that we were in power in the 1970s. And I'm old enough, despite my youthful appearance, to remember that I joined the Labour Party in 1976, and it was all kind of went downhill actually after I joined. We lost the county council in Derbyshire in 77, then we lost the general election in 79, then we lost even more devastatingly in 1983 and didn't do any better in 87. I thought, are we ever going to win again? But we did, and then we won 3 elections on the trot. But look, you know, Labour values are where the British people are at. People's overriding concern at the moment is about the economy. We've got a great story to tell, I think, about the economy in terms of Labour's values and how we want to ensure that the economy works for the majority, not just for the minority. And you think back, you know, to what Thatcher did. It created this whole kind of notion that you know, public was bad, private was good. That the financial services were our saviour. And whilst, yes, the financial services industry is an important industry, did do well for the British economy over those years. But, you know, when you look actually at the growth that was generated by the financial services sector, most of it actually didn't go to ordinary people. It was concentrated in a small minority of the population. So whilst, yes, it's important that we acknowledge financial services have got a role to play, we also need to stand up for manufacturing industry. And I come from, you know, Derby, where Rolls-Royce, the train-making industry, which almost is teetering on the brink because of what this government has done. The Thameslink contract, which should have come to Bombardier in Derby, has been given to Siemens. Now, I'm an internationalist, but for goodness sake, we need to actually support British manufacturing. And 3 months, you know, before they made that decision, Cameron brought his cabinet to Derby as an illustration of the sort of economy that Derby was, that they wanted to create across the nation. This was Derby was the backdrop to them rebalancing the economy towards manufacturing. And what did they do 3 months later? They gave the contract for Thameslink to build those trains, a £1.4 billion contract, to a German company. And, you know, that is they've got no work virtually. Like, so we could be in a ridiculous situation where the country that gave the world the railways, the city that gave the world the railways, actually could be in a situation where we're no longer able to build trains in an expanding market. It just doesn't make sense. So, you know, look, we're putting forward, I think, a proposal where we want a proper industrial policy that supports manufacturing, that recognises the role that plays. Ed Balls' recent announcement around the role that construction can make as well, and being a former bricklayer myself, I know full well how much a labour-intensive industry the construction industry is, and talking about using the sale of the 4G licence to build 100,000 homes. It is a really important step in the right direction. So I think it's up to us to actually get out there. There's only so much we can do in Parliament, and we do what we can, and sometimes you may think we don't do enough, but we do what we can here. But in the end, the Labour Party is about you. It's about the nation. It's about the people that look to us to represent their values, that represent their aspirations. And I'm confident that with what Ed has talked about in terms of the whole One Nation agenda is something that does play to the British people. We'll sell that message as much and as hard and as strongly as we can in every opportunity that we get, in every platform and every forum that we get to do that. But really, we've got to win the hearts and minds of these people, and that will mean ordinary party members getting out there, making the case on the doorstep, with your family, with your friends in the workplace and in the clubs and the pubs that you go to. And if we do that, I'm convinced that we can secure a fantastic general election victory next time, win back the Enfield seat that we've lost, and hopefully go on from strength to strength and not just be another one-term Labour government, but repeat that fantastic feat that we achieved. Never before in the lifetime, in the history of the Labour Party, did we get more than one full term. We've got 3 full terms. Let's aim to get another at least 3 full terms after 2015, and if not more than that. But anyway, I'll hand over to you.
We have David Lammy, MP for Tottenham, also here today. If we can have David to say a few words first, and then we'll go on to Stephen. David is coming.
This is incredibly warm from the Enfield Southgate party. It's lovely. I feel like I'm with old friends. And I'm not just saying that because the Boundary Commission planned to put half the top into
new friends.
And because when my dad arrived here in 1956, he slept on a couch in Palmer's Green for several months. There's lots of connections between Tom and Enfield. No, I'm here because actually, I've known this party for a long time, particularly in the days when Stephen was up there, and Joanne's here, and we've obviously worked together across boundaries. So let me just say a few things, and to take you back, and I suppose to draw on our experience in Tottenham. I can't convey to this room how difficult it was that Sunday morning in August, when myself and others walked down Tottenham High Road and looked into the faces of those shopkeepers, walking on glass, broken bricks, people standing outside all that they put their efforts and hard work into, families whose homes had been burnt to the ground, reflecting on how this had come to pass in just a few years of change in our country. And I know that in the days that followed, in fact, Enfield too had its share of pain and trouble that erupted in that London that all of us love so much. And it's a London that seemed so different to the London that we celebrated this August in the Olympics. But I know that this room understands that that London has not suddenly disappeared and got wrapped up in the Olympic Park. It still exists. It is still with us. And there is still a need for a political remedy to get underneath the problems that we see in our communities. I hope that this audience is as appalled as I was, that months after the riots, in a civilized country, where if you are a shopkeeper and you pay your taxes and you're entitled to compensation because something has gone wrong that was nothing to do with you, months, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months later, there were businesses that in London had no payout. There was a Riot Damages Act in which they were saying that if you got a bit of charity to help you on your way, they were going to deduct that from what you were entitled to. These are businesses that were struggling anyway in what is a double-dip recession that we had in this country. But when I think about what happened that summer, it comes back to two things that have happened in our country, two quiet revolutions that have engulfed all of us. The first is a revolution that brings, I always love a room like this in the House of Commons because I look into this room and this room looks like London. There are many people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds in this room. There are many women in this room. There is young and just a little older in this room. This is a diverse room. And we owe a lot of that to the first revolution I want to talk about, the revolution of the 1960s, that social liberal revolution that wanted to give freedom to people to define their own path in life. A battle that the Labour Party was in the midst of, a battle that we associate in the 20th century with people like Mandela, Martin Luther King, and others. It was a battle for rights, for all sorts of people that were denied those rights in different ways, and that battle goes on. In the coming months, there will be another battle to ensure that there are equal rights for gay men and women in this country, and we stand on the right side of that debate as well. But in 2012, if we are just aware of our rights and not of our responsibilities, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And there's something that connects that individual that smashes into Foot Locker because it's their right to that pair of trainers, to that banker that thinks it's his right to have that bonus, to that MP that thinks it's their right to have that duck house, to that journalist that thinks it's their right to listen to your voicemail. What is going on in this country where we cannot reassert our shared responsibility? And which is the party that has something other than just the individual to talk about? It is the Labour Party. It is that progressive party that says something about what we share and what our shared responsibility is. And that's why I was so pleased that Ed Miliband resurrected this idea, if you like, re-owned this idea of a one nation Labour Party that has something to say about how we all hang together. So that was the first revolution. Then that second liberal revolution was, of course, the economic liberal revolution of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. The freedom to make as much money as you want, however you want. And look where that's ended up in 2012. You know, I said my dad arrived here and he lived in Palmer's Green for a bit. He eventually went to the bank and he asked for a small loan to buy a house. That was a big deal actually in the 1950s because it wasn't the case that all banks were willing to give loans to black people. But he got his house in Tottenham. His sister arrived a few years later and she went to Haringey Council. And she said, I'd like to rent a place. And they said, we have this new, wonderful flat in a brand new housing development called Broadwater Farm. It was just 600 yards away from where her brother had bought his house. So I grew up between Dongola Road in Tottenham and Broadwater Farm. And I've watched our housing estates in this country go from being working class communities to workless class communities. It's not about a feral underclass, it's a working class just without work. And a government so driven by austerity and big business and an unwillingness to stand up to big corporate interests in this country, to get people to pay their taxes, to get banks to lend businesses loans, that we're seeing no growth in the British economy. And what's happening at the same time? Inflation is rising, as we're seeing it today. Are we heading back to those horrible 1980s, in which we see inflation soaring as interest rates then begin to rise a bit later? I remember a 15-year-old girl who was arrested literally within hours after the rush. She wasn't a very good looter. And it was all over the Daily Mail. I'll say nothing about that. And they said, the judge said, where are her parents? They weren't in court. The portrayal of her parents was feckless and uncaring. I know where her parents were because I know her parents. They've been to see me many times in surgery. Her parents are Londoners who can't afford to take a day off work because they won't keep their jobs. Her mum is a dinner lady at lunchtime and a cleaner at night. Her dad runs a minicab during the day and he's a security guard at night. These are people working two jobs because they're unable to make a living wage in this capital city. And which is the party that's championed a living wage? Which is the party, by the way, in the teeth of opposition gave us a minimum wage? It's the Labour Party, understanding that we do need to address why it is that companies with the money aren't prepared to pay people a decent wage so they can care and attend for their families. That's why we've got so many young people effectively being brought up either by themselves or older brothers and sisters. So that's the London that we saw erupt in flames that August. That's the London that still lies there waiting and praying for a progressive government that's willing to talk about the issues. And then there's another new story that I think that what we see in this cabinet and what we see in Ed Miliband that we can only we can address. Looking around this room, and I said there were just some people ever so slightly older who are part of that baby boomer generation. And I'm not going to say that it was all perfect, but you will recognise that a free education, the ability to buy your own home, to get a job and have more or less full employment for many years is so vastly different to a generation of young people that we are now asking to pay £9,000 to go to university, and it's inflationary, we find out today. The ability to get on the housing ladder in London? Certainly not in Palmer's Green. This is a very different story for these young people, many of whom are sitting at home on the dole. And a government that's committed to a Mickey Mouse joke YTS scheme, which is not really about proper employment. We need to get back, we need to address this. We need to bring back the Future Jobs Fund that was doing a great job before we lost office. So there's lots of reasons why we need a Labour MP in Enfield, Southgate. And I know that we in Tottenham, not taking my seat for granted,
But how are you going to overcome this? How are you going to overcome?
We will be up there with you as we have been in successive elections, knocking on doors, making the argument, persuading people, but I suspect going with the tide that is coming in this country to ensure, and let's not forget this, for all that we achieved, and we had the long list just before I spoke of all the achievements that we made in office. We were only in power in the 20th century 22 years. The goal is to get way more than that in this century. And I so look forward on general election night 2015 to see what Enfield Southgate delivers. Thank you very much.